She thought she would marry a disabled millionaire. But what happened at the wedding left her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The morning sun spilled through the thin curtains of a rundown apartment on the east side of the city. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the final notice from the hospital. Her younger brother's surgery was scheduled for next month, and the bill was an amount she could never imagine paying. She clutched the letter to her chest, feeling her breath grow shallow. For months, she had worked double shifts as a waitress, cleaning tables until her hands were raw. But the money she earned barely covered rent and groceries. Hope was slipping away like sand through her fingers. Just then, her phone buzzed with a number she did not recognize. She almost ignored it, but desperation made her swipe the screen. On the other end, a man's voice spoke with calm authority. "Miss Emma, I believe we have a proposal that may solve your problem." Emma's brows furrowed. "What do you mean? Who is this?" The man introduced himself as Mr. Harris, assistant to a very wealthy businessman named Adrian Blackwell. His words were clipped, professional, almost mechanical. He explained that Adrian, though a millionaire, was bound by family pressure to marry before the end of the year to secure his inheritance and retain control of his company. "We understand your situation, Mr. Harris continued. You need money. He needs a wife. We believe we can come to an arrangement." Emma froze. The idea was outrageous. Marry a stranger? For money? Yet when Mr. Harris calmly mentioned the exact figure they were willing to transfer to her account the day she signed, her heart pounded so hard she thought her ribs might crack. The amount was enough to pay for her brother's surgery, clear her debts, and still have a small cushion left over. Still, her pride fought back. "So, I would just sell myself? Pretend to be his wife for the world to see?" "Not pretend," Mr. Harris corrected. "Legally, you would be his wife. But it is a contract, a professional arrangement. 1 year. At the end of the term, you will part ways. Quietly, respectfully." Emma's throat tightened. She thought of her brother lying pale in the hospital bed, his small hand clutching hers, whispering, "Do not give up on me." The image sliced through her resistance. Later that evening, she found herself standing in front of a towering glass building downtown. The revolving doors spun silently, and the marble lobby gleamed under golden lights. Everything smelled of money, of power, of a world she had never belonged to. She clutched her worn handbag tighter as the receptionist led her to the elevator. When the doors opened on the top floor, she saw him. Adrian Blackwell sat in a wheelchair behind a massive oak desk, his broad shoulders squared, his eyes like cold steel. His presence filled the room, not with warmth, but with an air of unyielding command. He did not smile when she entered. Instead, he studied her as if she were a contract, not a person. "You are smaller than I expected," he said flatly. Emma stiffened. "And you are ruder than I expected." The words escaped her before she could stop them. For a brief moment, something flickered in his gaze, almost like surprise. Then his lips curved into the faintest smirk. "At least you are not spineless. That will make this easier." He slid a folder across the desk. The contract. Thick, formal, written in precise legal terms. At the bottom was a line for her signature. He tapped it with one finger. 1 year. You will play the role of my wife. Public events, family dinners, the occasional charity gala. In exchange, you will be compensated handsomely. No intimacy is required. Do we have a deal? Emma's hand trembled as she reached for the pen. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the thought of her brother's fragile smile forced her to stay rooted to the chair. She lifted her eyes to Adrian's, trying to read him, trying to see if there was any humanity behind those piercing eyes. "Why me?" she whispered. His answer was sharp. "Because you are desperate enough to say yes." "Oh?" Her heart lurched. She signed her name. As she set the pen down, Adrian closed the folder with finality. "Then it is settled. Welcome to the contract marriage. Mrs. Blackwell." The title hit her like a thunderclap. Mrs. Blackwell. It sounded unreal, like a name that belonged to someone else entirely. But it was hers now, for 1 year. Emma's life had just changed forever, and she had no idea what the wedding day would bring. The wedding was quiet, rushed, and nothing like the dreams Emma once had as a little girl. No flowers, no music, no vows spoken from the heart. Only signatures on documents, the flash of a camera for the legal record, and a ring slipped onto her finger that felt cold and heavy. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, she barely had time to catch her breath before Adrian's assistant ushered her into a waiting car. From that moment, her life as Mrs. Blackwell had officially begun. The mansion was the next shock. Adrian's home loomed over the hills like a fortress, its marble pillars and endless glass windows glinting in the twilight. Inside, the ceilings soared high, chandeliers dripping with crystal, and polished floors that echoed with every step. Emma felt like a trespasser in a museum, terrified to touch anything for fear of breaking it. "Your room is down that hallway," Adrian said curtly, pointing without looking at her. He remained in his wheelchair, his posture stiff, his eyes already focused on a document in his lap. "My room?" Emma echoed, her voice small. "Yes. Did you expect to share mine?" His tone carried a faint hint of mockery. Emma's cheeks burned. "Number, of course not." She turned quickly and dragged her suitcase toward the guest wing. Her footsteps loud in the silent corridor. That first night was unbearable. The bed was enormous, draped with silk sheets, softer than anything she had ever felt. But Emma could not sleep. Her mind replayed the cold ceremony, Adrian's unreadable eyes, and the suffocating weight of the contract she had signed. She curled up, clutching her brother's photo to her chest, whispering a silent promise to endure whatever came next. The following morning began with chaos. Emma stepped into the dining hall to find a long table laid with silverware and dishes she could not even name. Adrian was already there, impeccably dressed, reading the newspaper as if she did not exist. She took a seat hesitantly, only for a housekeeper to rush over, whispering urgently in her ear about the correct fork to use and how not to embarrass Mr. Blackwell in front of the staff. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for the utensils. She had spent her life eating from chipped plates in a cramped kitchen. Now she was expected to know the difference between a salad fork and a fish fork. She glanced up and caught Adrian watching her over the rim of his glass. His expression was unreadable, but she could swear there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Later that week came her first public appearance. Adrian's family hosted a dinner, inviting board members, relatives, and influential figures from the city. Emma wore a gown chosen by Adrian's assistant, a deep emerald that clung to her in ways that made her uncomfortable. When she stepped into the glittering hall filled with chandeliers and laughter, every eye turned to her. The whispers started immediately. "That is his wife? She looks so ordinary. I heard she was a waitress." Emma kept her head high, but each word cut like glass. She forced a polite smile, her palms slick with sweat. At one point, Adrian's cousin leaned in and murmured just loud enough for others to hear, "She must be very talented at something, or else why would Adrian bother?" Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Before Emma could retreat, Adrian wheeled closer, his voice low but firm. "Enough." His gaze swept the room, silencing the whispers. He placed a hand lightly on Emma's arm, steadying her. For a fleeting moment, she felt protected. But then he removed his hand and returned to his cold composure, leaving her more confused than ever. Back at the mansion that night, Emma confronted him in the hallway. "Why do you let them treat me like that? I am not a prop for your games." Adrian stopped, turning his chair slowly to face her. His eyes glinted in the dim light. "You signed the contract. You wanted money. Do not pretend you are here for anything else." The words hit her like a slap. Her chest ached, but she refused to cry in front of him. "Maybe I did it for money," she whispered, "but that does not mean I deserve to be humiliated." For the first time, Adrian looked at her as if seeing her differently. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Then, without another word, he turned away and disappeared into his study, leaving Emma alone in the dark corridor, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and something she could not yet name. Emma realized that living in this mansion, under Adrian's gaze and the scrutiny of his world, would be a battlefield, and she would need every ounce of strength to survive. Days turned into weeks, and Emma quickly learned that life inside Adrian Blackwell's mansion was a constant test. Every moment felt like a trial she had not studied for, a world where the smallest mistake became an invitation for judgment. The staff moved with precision, the rules of etiquette were endless, and the line between being tolerated and being ridiculed was razor-thin. One morning, Emma was escorted by Mr. Harris to a charity luncheon hosted by the Blackwell Foundation. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, and tables were adorned with flawless flower arrangements. Women in designer gowns whispered behind their manicured hands, and men in tailored suits greeted Adrian with stiff politeness. Emma sat at Adrian's side, her posture straight, her heart pounding. As the speeches began, she tried to follow along, but the language of business and philanthropy was foreign to her. When a guest asked her opinion about international trade policies, her face flushed crimson. She stammered, I do not really know much about that," before sinking into silence. Snickers rippled through the table. Adrian's eyes flicked toward her. He did not come to her defense this time. Instead, he returned to his glass of wine, leaving her to drown in embarrassment. Emma forced herself to swallow the humiliation, but inside, her resentment grew. Back at the mansion, the tension between them thickened. Their schedules collided in the quiet corners of the house. In the mornings, Emma often found Adrian in the library, his wheelchair angled toward the fireplace as he reviewed stacks of documents. She would pass by, pretending not to notice him, though the air always seemed heavier when he was near. One evening, the tension broke. Emma had ventured into the kitchen, craving a moment of normalcy. She prepared a simple grilled cheese sandwich, something that reminded her of home. Just as she was about to take a bite, Adrian rolled in, his expression unreadable. "What is that?" he asked flatly. "It is dinner," she replied, irritated. "Not everyone wants caviar and filet mignon every night." His brows lifted slightly. "You cooked that yourself?" "Yes. Do you want me to make you one? Or will that ruin your image as the untouchable Mr. Blackwell?" Her sarcasm slipped out before she could stop it. To her surprise, his lips curved into a faint smile. "One would not hurt." Emma blinked, startled. She made him a sandwich, plating it clumsily compared to the elegant presentations the chef usually prepared. Adrian took a bite, and for the first time since their marriage, his expression softened. "It tastes real," he murmured. The simple moment shifted something between them. For a few minutes they were not CEO and contract wife. They were just two people in a kitchen, sharing an ordinary meal. But the fragile peace shattered soon after. The following weekend, they attended a gala hosted by Adrian's business partner. Emma wore a sapphire gown chosen for her, its weight dragging against her shoulders as though it carried everyone's expectations. The night began smoothly, but halfway through, Adrian's former fiancée approached. Tall, elegant, and armed with a cutting smile, she circled Emma like a predator. "So you are the famous Mrs. Blackwell," she said sweetly, though her eyes were sharp as glass. "I must say, you do not exactly fit the image." "Oh." Emma's pulse raced, but she forced herself to meet the woman's gaze. Perhaps the image needed a change. The room fell silent around them, whispers rising like smoke. The woman's smile faltered, but before Emma could savor the small victory, Adrian's hand gripped her elbow. "Enough," he muttered, steering her away. His face was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. In the car ride home, the silence was suffocating. Finally, Emma spoke. "Why do you let them speak to me like that? Do you enjoy watching me squirm?" Adrian's voice was low, almost harsh. "You are not here to fight battles. You are here to play a role. Keep your head down, smile when necessary, and do not provoke them." Her eyes burned. "I am not a puppet. I am not a doll for you to position where you want. I am a person, Adrian." He turned his head toward her, his eyes dark in the shadows. "Then prove it. Show me you can survive in this world without crumbling." The challenge hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Emma clenched her fists in her lap, anger and determination colliding inside her. She did not know if she could win in Adrian Blackwell's world, but one thing was certain: she would no longer be silent. And as the city lights blurred past the car window, Emma realized that the war between them had only just begun. The days that followed the gala were heavy with silence. Emma moved through the mansion like a ghost, determined not to give Adrian the satisfaction of seeing her falter. Yet her mind replayed his words over and over. "Show me you can survive in this world without crumbling." She wanted to prove him wrong, but she also wanted to prove something to herself. She began to spend hours in the library, reading books on etiquette, business, and history. She asked the housekeepers quiet questions about dining customs, studied the news to understand the world Adrian's circle constantly discussed, and even practiced speaking with poise in front of the mirror. It was exhausting, but it gave her a sense of control. One evening, Adrian wheeled into the library and found her surrounded by open books, his brow lifted slightly. "Studying?" Emma looked up, meeting his gaze with steady determination. "You told me to survive in your world. That is exactly what I am doing." For the first time, Adrian did not respond with sarcasm. Instead, he watched her quietly, as if seeing her in a new light. After a moment, he simply said, "Good," and left the room. The shift was subtle, but Emma felt it. Their interactions grew less hostile, more layered. At breakfast, Adrian no longer ignored her. He asked brief questions about her day. At events, he did not leave her adrift, but occasionally guided her with a quiet word or a steadying glance. It was not warmth, but it was something. The turning point came one stormy evening. The rain pounded against the mansion's windows, and a sudden power outage plunged the house into darkness. Emma had been in the hallway when the lights went out, and she froze, heart pounding. She had always hated storms. Memories of childhood nights in a leaking apartment, her brother trembling beside her, flooded back. Adrian's voice came from the shadows. "Emma? I am here," she called, her voice shaking more than she wanted. A beam of light cut through the dark as Adrian rolled toward her, a small flashlight in his hand. He stopped beside her, his eyes catching the glow. "You are trembling," he observed quietly. "It is just the storm," she admitted, her voice soft. "I never liked them." "Nah." Something softened in his expression. Without a word, he handed her the flashlight and gestured for her to follow him. They ended up in his study, where the fireplace still held a faint glow. Adrian struck a match, lighting the logs until flames crackled and warmth filled the room. Emma sat across from him, hugging her knees. For a while, neither spoke, the firelight painting their faces in golden shadow. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. "When I was younger, before the accident, storms never bothered me. Now, I suppose they remind me of how quickly everything can change." Emma turned to him, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "The accident? Is that why you—" She trailed off, glancing at the wheelchair. He nodded, his eyes distant. "Car crash. One night, one mistake, and suddenly the world I knew was gone. People see the chair and think it defines me. But I refuse to let it." Oh. For the first time, Emma glimpsed the man behind the cold exterior. Not just the ruthless CEO, but someone who carried his own scars. She felt an unexpected tug in her chest, a sympathy she had not allowed herself before. "Maybe," she said softly, "we both have something to prove." Their eyes met across the firelight, and for a brief, fragile moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink. But before the moment could deepen, Adrian leaned back, his expression shuddering again. "Do not mistake understanding for closeness, Emma. This is still a contract." The words stung, but Emma nodded, holding his gaze with quiet strength. She knew then that their bond, fragile as it was, had begun to shift. And though Adrian tried to deny it, something in the way he lingered on her face before turning away revealed the truth. The lines between contract and something more were beginning to blur. The morning after the storm, Emma woke to a strange sense of calm. The mansion was quieter than usual, the staff moving softly through the halls. She replayed the night in her mind, the glow of the fire. Adrian's voice, when he admitted the accident, had changed everything. The way his eyes softened for just a moment. It lingered in her chest like an echo she could not shake. But Adrian was back to his usual self. At breakfast, he sat at the head of the long table, reading the financial section, his tone clipped and cool when he spoke. Yet Emma noticed the smallest things. The way his gaze lingered on her a fraction longer than before. The way he pushed the fruit platter closer to her without comment, as though caring without admitting it. That afternoon, Emma decided to take a walk in the gardens to clear her mind. The air was fresh after the rain, and the roses glistened with drops of water. She carried her sketchbook, something she had not touched in months, and settled on a bench. As she began to draw, she felt a sense of peace she had forgotten existed. A shadow fell over her page. She looked up to see Adrian watching her. "You draw," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Emma closed the book self-consciously. "It is nothing. Just a hobby." "Let me see," he pressed. Reluctantly, she handed him the sketchbook. His hands were steady as he flipped through the pages, pausing on a drawing of her younger brother in the hospital bed. His expression shifted, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You are talented," he said finally. Emma's chest tightened. Compliments were rare from him, and this one felt genuine. "It helps me breathe," she admitted softly. "When everything feels too heavy, I draw." For a long moment, Adrian was silent. Then he handed the book back. "Do not hide it. The world will always try to silence you. Do not give them the satisfaction." Oh, the words struck her deeply, and for the first time, Emma sensed encouragement beneath his armor. Later that week, Adrian insisted she accompany him to another business dinner. Emma dreaded it, fearing another night of whispers and judgment, but she went anyway. She walked into the glittering hall on Adrian's arm, her emerald dress flowing behind her. The murmurs started immediately, but this time, Emma stood straighter. She smiled with quiet confidence, remembering his words. "Do not give them the satisfaction." When a board member tried to corner her with another condescending question, Emma responded with grace, steering the conversation toward her knowledge of charity work and her interest in art therapy for children. To her surprise, several guests leaned in, intrigued. Adrian's lips curved in the faintest trace of approval as he watched her handle herself with poise. The night ended without humiliation. Back in the car, Emma exhaled, relief flooding her. "I think I survived," she said with a small laugh. Adrian turned his head toward her, his gaze steady. "You did more than survive. You proved them wrong." For a moment, silence stretched between them, warm instead of cold. Their eyes met, and Emma felt her heartbeat quicken. She looked away quickly, afraid of what she might see reflected back. The following days were filled with small but undeniable shifts. They began to share meals in the library instead of the cavernous dining hall. Adrian listened when Emma spoke, and she found herself laughing, really laughing for the first time in months. One evening, she even caught him watching her sketch again, his expression softer than she had ever seen. But beneath it all, Emma could not forget his warning. This is still a contract. She told herself not to hope, not to let her heart drift toward the impossible. And yet, every shared glance, every quiet conversation, every spark of warmth made the line between contract and reality blur further. Emma did not know it yet, but the fragile thread pulling them together was about to be tested in ways she could never imagine. The fragile balance between Emma and Adrian did not last long. Just when she began to believe that perhaps the mansion was no longer a prison, the storm of truth came crashing down. It began with whispers in the press. Tabloids published photos of Emma at charity events, headlines mocking her background as a waitress. "From coffee stains to crystal chandeliers," one article sneered. At first, she ignored them, telling herself that words could not hurt her. But when Adrian's board of directors received anonymous letters exposing their contract marriage, everything spiraled out of control. One evening, Emma walked into the grand hall only to find Adrian's aunt and cousin waiting for her, their eyes sharp with disdain. "So it is true," the cousin hissed. "You are nothing more than a paid actress in this farce." Emma's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" The aunt shoved a copy of the leaked contract at her. "This. You signed your name. 1 year of marriage for money. Did you really think you could fool us forever?" Emma's blood ran cold. Her hands shook as she stared at the familiar document. Someone had stolen it. Someone had exposed everything. By the time Adrian entered the hall, the room was buzzing with venomous laughter. "She is a fraud," his cousin sneered. "A gold digger playing dress-up. What will the world say about you now, Adrian?" The mighty Blackwell fooled by a waitress. Emma looked to Adrian, her eyes desperate. For once, she needed him to stand beside her. She needed him to silence the cruel voices, to tell the world that she was more than a contract. But Adrian's face was unreadable, his silence louder than the accusations. Her heart cracked. "Say something," she whispered. But he did not. The weight of the room pressed down on her until she could not breathe. Humiliation burned through her veins as tears stung her eyes. Finally, she turned and fled the mansion, her footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Emma ran into the night, the cold air biting her skin. She found herself at a small park across town, sitting on a bench beneath a flickering streetlight. Her gown was ruined, her makeup streaked, but she did not care. She pulled her brother's photograph from her purse and clutched it tightly, the only anchor in a world that had collapsed around her. Back at the mansion, Adrian sat in his study, staring at the fire. Mr. Harris entered quietly. "You let her go," the assistant said, his voice low. Adrian's jaw tightened. The exposure was inevitable. If I had defended her, they would have destroyed her further. Silence was the only shield I could give her. But the words tasted bitter. Deep down, he knew his silence had not protected her, it had betrayed her. He replayed the look in Emma's eyes, the way her voice cracked when she pleaded for him to speak. It haunted him. Meanwhile, Emma's humiliation spread through the city like wildfire. Headlines blared, social media mocked her, and whispers followed her wherever she went. She considered packing her things and disappearing altogether, but then she thought of her brother and the promise she had made. She could not crumble. Yet, in the darkest corner of her heart, a truth she refused to admit took root. She had not just wanted Adrian's defense for survival. She had wanted it because, against her better judgment, she had begun to care for him. As dawn broke, Emma realized that the contract was no longer just about money or survival. It was about her dignity, her worth, and the part of her heart she had unwillingly given to Adrian Blackwell. And though the world now saw her as a fraud, Emma vowed that she would not let them define her story. The battle was not over. It had only just begun. The scandal did not fade as quickly as Adrian had hoped. The news cycle feasted on Emma's humiliation, and each headline cut deeper than the last. Adrian watched silently as his world remained intact while hers crumbled. For days, he said nothing, burying himself in meetings and phone calls, convincing himself that business came first. But at night, when the mansion was quiet, he replayed her voice in his mind. "Say something." It gnawed at him until he could no longer ignore it. On the fourth day, Adrian made a decision. At a press conference already scheduled for his company's quarterly report, he wheeled himself onto the stage, ignoring the board members' protests. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but he raised a hand for silence. His voice was calm, yet firm enough to command the room. "There has been speculation about my marriage," he began. "It is true that Emma and I signed a contract. At first, it was an arrangement. But what began as necessity has become something real. She is not a fraud. She is not a gold digger. She is my wife, and I will not allow anyone to slander her again." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. Adrian's declaration was bold, reckless even, but it was the first time he had publicly defied the powerful family members and board members who sought to control him. Back in her modest apartment, Emma watched the press conference on a small television. Her breath caught when she heard his words. She pressed a hand to her chest, her heart pounding. She had expected more silence, more cold indifference. Instead, Adrian had stood before the world and chosen her. Moments later, her phone buzzed. It was Adrian. She hesitated, then answered. His voice was lower, stripped of its usual sharpness. "Emma, I was wrong. I should have defended you that night. I thought silence would shield you, but I see now it only hurt you. I cannot undo the damage, but I can promise you this. I will fight for you from now on." Emma closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Part of her wanted to believe him, to let those words mend the cracks in her heart. But the wound was still fresh, and trust was not something she could give so easily. "You cannot just say it once and expect it to fix everything," she whispered. "You will have to prove it." There was a pause, and then Adrian's answer was steady. "Then I will prove it, for as long as it takes." For the first time since the nightmare began, Emma felt a flicker of something she thought she had lost hope. And though the world still doubted her, she realized she was no longer standing alone. Adrian Blackwell had finally chosen to stand beside her, not as part of a contract, but as a man willing to fight for the woman he could no longer deny he loved. The seasons shifted, and with them, so did Emma's life. What had begun as a desperate bargain now felt like something altogether different. The whispers of the world had not disappeared, but they no longer held the same power over her. Each time she walked into a room beside Adrian, she held her head high, not as an imposter, but as his true partner. Months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Adrian asked her to meet him in the very garden where she once sketched roses after the storm. Lanterns glowed softly along the paths, and the scent of blooming jasmine filled the air. Emma arrived to find Adrian waiting, his wheelchair positioned beneath the arbor, his eyes steady but his hands uncharacteristically tense. "Emma," he began, his voice carrying both strength and vulnerability. "The contract that bound us was supposed to end tonight. But I cannot imagine a life where you are no longer here. From the beginning, you were more than a name on paper. You challenged me, you stood tall when the world tried to break you, and you reminded me what it means to be human." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a simple, elegant ring that glimmered in the lantern light. This time, no contracts, no bargains, just me, asking you to choose me. "Will you marry me, Emma? Not for money, not for duty, but for love?" Emma's breath caught, her hands trembling as tears filled her eyes. She remembered the first night in the mansion, the cold words, the heavy silence. She remembered the humiliation, the battles, the nights she doubted her own worth. And she remembered the firelight, his quiet encouragement, and the moment he stood before the world and called her his wife with pride. Her heart swelled as she whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, his hand lingering against hers. The garden seemed to hold its breath as Emma leaned down, pressing her lips gently against his. It was not the kiss of a bargain, nor the staged affection of a contract. It was real, raw, and filled with a promise neither of them needed to put into words. From the shadows of the mansion, staff who had once doubted now smiled quietly, recognizing the truth that had finally taken root. Emma was no longer the outsider, the girl whispered about in scandal. She was Mrs. Blackwell, in every sense chosen, cherished, and loved. And as the lanterns flickered against the night sky, Adrian and Emma's story closed, not with signatures on a contract, but with the vow of two hearts that had fought their way through fire and found each other on the other side. The contract marriage had ended. The real marriage had just begun. The contract's end date approached quietly, yet neither Emma nor Adrian could ignore its weight. The paper that once bound them together had been the source of so much pain and transformation. What began as survival had evolved into something deeper. Something that could no longer be measured in terms of months or money. On the evening the contract was set to expire, Emma found herself standing in the mansion's grand hall. The memories of her first night there rushed back her trembling hands, the humiliation, the fear of being nothing more than a pawn. But tonight was different. Tonight she was no longer the outsider. She was a woman who had faced whispers, cruelty, and doubt, and had discovered her own strength. Adrian entered, his expression steady but his eyes carrying a flicker of vulnerability. In his hand, he held the contract, neatly folded. Without a word, he placed it on the fire. The flames curled the edges until the paper blackened and disappeared into ash. "Emma," he said quietly, "we began with signatures on a page, but the truth is, I no longer care about contracts. I care about you. You were never the fraud they painted you to be. You are the woman who stood by me when no one else dared, and I cannot imagine a future without you in it." He reached into his pocket and revealed a ring, simple, elegant, yet filled with meaning. He looked up at her, his voice steady. "This time, no bargains, no deadlines. I am asking you not as part of a deal, but as the man who loves you. Will you marry me, Emma, for real?" Emma's vision blurred with tears. Her heart pounded as she remembered every moment that had led them here, the firelight confession, the public defense, the nights of silent resilience. She had promised herself never to dream of love in this marriage, yet here it was, raw and undeniable. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will." Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, his hand lingering against hers. Emma leaned closer, her lips meeting his in a kiss that erased every shadow of doubt. It was not the forced affection of a contract, but the vow of two souls who had fought against circumstance and prejudice and had chosen each other freely. As the fire crackled behind them, the mansion felt transformed. No longer a place of cold walls and silent judgments, it now carried the warmth of a true home. The story that had begun as a bargain ended with a promise. The contract marriage was gone, replaced by something far stronger. A love that neither scandal, nor whispers, nor pride could destroy. And for Emma, the girl who once thought she was selling herself into a cage, the truth was clear. She had not lost her dignity. She had found her worth. She had found love.